Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. If everybody could find a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a full agenda, and we do have several individuals who have signed up to provide public comment. So I'd like to go ahead and get started. And Mr. Treasurer, would you mind calling the roll, please?
President Baker?
Present.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Vice President Cole? Ms. Gibbs?
Here.
Ms. Hudson? Mr. Peretti?
Here.
Ms. Reyes?
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. And I'd like to call on my friend, Michael Stinziano, if he's in the back of the room. Come on up, please, and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone be upstanding, please. Council Member Stinziano, thank you.
Thank you, President Baker. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, President.
All right, what I'd like to do now is just quickly read through our agenda so we know the work before us this evening prior to adopting the agenda. And at the request of the superintendent, we've added item 16.1 to the agenda, a motion to name Mr. Jerry Saunders to the Superintendent's Facilities Task Force. This fills a vacancy to the task force list we approved at our last meeting. I'm also going to ask my colleagues that we amend our agenda somewhat tonight because we have individuals here to address the board about our proposed action on Indianola Middle School. I'm going to ask we move the public comment portion on agenda items further down in the agenda after our financial report from the treasurer, which he has promised me will be brief. This way we will hear from our constituents on the matter right before our board discussion on the topic. We'll hold our public comment portion on non-agenda items right after we approve the agenda. So after we approve the agenda, we'll hear from those of you who have signed up to speak on non-agenda items. So after we take public comment, we will hear our direct reports, after which we will take up a discussion of Indianola Middle School or Junior High School. We will then consider our consent agenda, after which we will hear announcements, and we will adjourn after that. So having said that, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as it's presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do now is take those individuals who have signed up to speak on non-agenda items and rules of speaking before the board. Each speaker has 4 minutes. You'll see a timer up on the screen, and we would ask you to try to keep your comments to 4 minutes since we do have a number of speakers and a long agenda this evening. So our first speaker is Ernest West. Topics: community partnership, board action, recognize community partnerships. Come on up to the podium. Thank you this evening.
Good evening, President Baker,
Good evening.
Vice President Cole, and the outstanding Board of Education for Columbus City Schools. Dr. Stanford, Superintendent, it is my privilege to be before you to really talk about the outstanding work that my students and community partnerships are doing in the community out in the southeast quadrant of the school of the city, and I want to have our students talk about that this evening.
Good evening, President Baker, and to the rest of our Columbus City School Board members. I am the senior class president of Independence High School, and on behalf of our principal, Mr. West, the rest of our administrative team, staff, and student body, I would like to thank you for having us here today. All of us seniors are here because we wanted to say thank you for the work you're doing to encourage and support the community partnership. Within Columbus City Schools, it has made a huge difference in progression. In February, we celebrated Relationship Week, where we had the opportunity to directly thank all of our community partners and support our school. We wanted to publicly acknowledge some of our partners and quickly let you know some of the contributions they made to our school program. First are Mentor a Senior initiative. We have over 45 external mentors from all over the community and 36 internal mentors that meet with our seniors each week to support their plans for graduation.
We also have City of Columbus Councilwoman Jiza Page, our Any Girl Can Service and Leadership Academy. The mission of our Any Girl Can is to equip each young lady with necessary skills and disposition to recognize their self-worth, leadership opportunities, and become informed, civically engaged advocates in their communities. Next, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Central Ohio chapter sponsored 35 young ladies from our school to attend a STEM workshop for girls at the Columbus Idea Founder. Next, the Links Incorporated Columbus, Ohio chapter facilitated a full-day workshop on human trafficking for every girl in our school. I Know I Can works hard in our school every day to ensure seniors are getting to college. Starstruck Apparel donated 85 t-shirts to our school mentoring program.
We also have several other important organizations that play an integral in the success of our program. They are Big Brother Big Sisters, The Ohio State University, Ohio Health, Nationwide Children's Hospital, the YWCA, First Church of God, Champs, and All That Mentoring. Thank you again for ensuring our district continues to build and maintain partnership. For our senior class, it has been very helpful. Thank you for helping us recognize the contributions for our partners have made to our school program. Thank you.
Thank you. Principal West, would you mind just having each of the students introduce themselves
Yes.
before they leave? Just say your name, please.
Okay. My name's Serenity Triplet.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ali Faye, graduating senior.
My name is Rhonda Cook. I'm a graduating senior.
I'm Jalen. I'm graduating senior.
My name is Keyshawn McGee. I'm a graduating senior.
I want to thank you again for being here tonight. I know it's not easy to come and speak in front of a group of people, and I think as part of your requirement for graduation, you have to give a senior speech, and so hopefully you got some good practice tonight. So do you mind taking a picture? Would you all come right up front here so we can take a photograph?
We got to unroll it.
Thanks again to those students from iHigh for being here tonight to talk about community partnerships and how important it is. And thank you, Principal West. Keep up the good work. All right, next speaker on the list is Carter Womack. Topic, student leadership, board action. Listen to students about the program and take a photograph with them. Is Carter Womack here this evening? No? All right, very good. Catherine English, not here either? Catherine English is the third speaker? No. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. All right. We're going to move on then quickly to our direct reports, which I've been assured will be brief this evening, and then we will take up the matter for which I know a lot of you are here this evening. So, Dr. Stanford, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. At the time of our last regular board meeting, our students and the majority of our district staff were still on spring break. Since coming back, students and staff have truly ramped up their efforts to finish the school year out strong. allow me to rattle off just some of the honors and activities that our students and staff members in the district have been engaged in over the past 9 days. That's right, 9 days. Like a phoenix from the ashes, the cupola atop West High School has risen again, and hundreds of West alumni and community members joined President Baker, Principal Check, Chief Operations Officer Maurice Odom, and myself for a special lighting ceremony to celebrate the return of the iconic structure, and Miss Gibbs was there as well. Our Facilities Task Force had its first meeting last Thursday. 18 volunteer community and business partners have come together to help us in evaluating criteria and determining which schools and district-owned buildings this board might consider for closing later on this year. At the City Year Red Jacket Ball on Saturday, the Big Lots Foundation announced a $300,000 donation to provide a full year of City Year core services at Champion Middle School. And Ms. Gibbs and Ms. Reyes joined us for that celebration as well, along with Vice President Cole. The Ohio Alliance of Black School Educators on Saturday presented Indian Springs Elementary Principal Lisa Adams with its 2018 Principal of the Year Award during their 5th annual recognition banquet. Dozens of our district's bus drivers competed in the 2018 Bus Rodeo, and they earned the First Place Team Award, Third Place Team Award, and individual medals for 9th, 10th, and 11th place, giving our district the distinction of having one of the safest and best trained bus driver teams in the state. Hundreds of our families received valuable information on Saturday and free activities to better keep our students engaged over the summer months at the K-12 Summer Opportunities and Engagement Fair at the Columbus Metropolitan Library's downtown branch. As you can see, Saturday was a really busy day. The musical members of the Columbus Alternative High School, choral, Columbus Alternative, traveled to New York City where they participated in the World Strides Heritage Festival. And guess what? They earned first place trophy for their efforts. And I'm not done yet. More than 100 students and community partners took part in the first ever Bio Blitz at Spruce Run. Volunteers from around the city spread out across the entire nature preserve, taking pictures and cataloging everything that's alive out there. A remarkable and outspoken group of West High School Latino students joined Board Member Reyes at the Hispanic Legislative Visit Day at the State House. That day featured in-depth dialogue on the opportunities and challenges facing Latino community members in Ohio. The Berwick Middle School girls basketball team was honored at Columbus City Council for their championship run this season in the City League. And of course, the Lady Nubians of Columbus Afrocentric Early College were recognized by the Franklin County Board of Commissioners for winning their 6th state basketball championship. Our Air Force Junior ROTC cadets were personally selected by the Mayor's Office to present the colors at the 33rd Annual City of Columbus Holocaust Remembrance Program at City Hall. Our first in the world effort to bring those automated short story kiosks from France into our school district was reported on by the New York Times, including a recognition of our leadership in raising reading advocacy to a new level here in the city of Columbus. Just yesterday, as part of our annual elementary school choice process, our team of exceptional team members at Central Enrollment sent out nearly 800 elementary lottery offers to our families. And this year, the process was all done through our online portal, parent portal, which can be accessed on the Columbus City Schools mobile app. And that needs a round of applause as well, because that means we saved some dollars in that process. And today, one of our graduating seniors at Mifflin High School learned that she became the first of 15 students to earn a Capital University inaugural Bonner Leaders Scholarship. The Bonner Leaders Scholarship is an honor that celebrates first-generation students who have a passion for community engagement and social justice. This particular student also received a full tuition award from I Know I Can. And joining our senior at Mifflin High School for this presentation was Board President Baker and also Board Member Brown. Wow, what a list, right? I am nearly out of breath just going through this abbreviated list of activities and honors from just the past 9 days. But this brief list demonstrates the high levels of determination and empowerment and the spirit of success that energizes all we do every day in every corner of this district. And it also demonstrates the level of commitment and the hard work by our team members across the district who are supporting and helping our students achieve at high levels. There is one final part to my report this evening, and I would like to ask COS Principal Daryl Sanders to come to the podium. And as he approaches, let me share that the International Baccalaureate program at COS continues to be a treasured gem in our district. The percentage of students taking the IB coursework at COS has increased from 28% in 2012 to a whopping 81% in 2016. And I know that this was one of the things that Principal Sanders was going to really emphasize and focus in on when he began his leadership at COS. And thank you, Principal Sanders, for that effort. The board recently approved legislation that further supports the IB program at COS and how it challenges our students to recreate and reimagine their own learning at the highest levels. To give us more information on the International Baccalaureate program at COS, I will conclude my portion of this report and turn the microphone over to Principal Sanders and his team to present on the International Baccalaureate program. Mr. Sanders.
Thanks, Dr. Stanford. Good evening, Board President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board, Superintendent Stanford, Madam Internal Auditor, Mr. Treasurer, and Director Johnson. I am Daryl Sanders, the proud principal and school leader at one of the U.S. News and World Report best high schools, Columbus Alternative High School, better known as COS. Columbus Alternative High School is very pleased to be given this opportunity to share with you information regarding our International Baccalaureate program. COS has been an IB school since 2004. We are the only urban public IB program in Franklin County, and one of a handful in the state of Ohio. We began serving 19 students and now, as Dr. Stanford said, serves 276 juniors and seniors. The IB mission includes developing, inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who can create a better and a more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. The IB program provides an entry point to the most rigorous college-level coursework in the high school setting for those students who might not normally have access. The program facilitates opportunities for individuals and collaborative research with interdisciplinary emphasis across a broad range of subjects, drawing content from various cultures. The IB program prepares students for the college and universities of their choice, while easing the impact of the transition to post-secondary education and reducing the need for remediation through careful preparation. IB encourages students to become active, compassionate, lifelong learners who understand that other people, with their differences, can also be right. The IB is celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2018 and now offers over 6,000 IB programs across the globe. Your packet contains several documents which provide information about the diploma program at the local, the state, and global levels, as well as data that highlights some of the key achievements of the IB diploma program at COS. Tonight, I would like to introduce members of the COS IB team to further share with you how IB at COS is a verb, not a noun. Ms. Jamie Foley is an IB teacher with us. Our COS senior and IB diploma candidate, Asia Atua, is with us. And we also have several members of the COS IB learning community with us as well. Ms. Foley?
Thank you. I am Jamie Foley, a COS Humanities and IB educator. In 2004, when we were applying to the IB, we were told repeatedly that the IB practices would shape our grades 9 and 10. At the time, I can remember thinking how difficult that would be when faced with beginning a program for grades 11 and 12. However, the reality is that that promised impact has indeed occurred, organically, as the staff has come to know what is required for students to succeed in the IB program. The IB informs and confirms our curricular choices for all courses in grades 9 through 12. The tasks that we are asking of 9th and 10th graders are indeed challenging, but it is not meant to be exclusive, a means to weed out students. Instead, they are preparatory. Every student, regardless of middle school or zip code, is worth being ready to participate in that IB program. Because the results are more than a test score. The results are a self-awareness that is so essential for young people today. Who are you really? Who will you be? And can you be a compassionate change agent in this world? IB has influenced how we teach our courses at all levels. The IB curriculum models an integrated approach aligned smoothly with the integrated Common Core standards that the district has adopted. Every IB course that a student enrolls in requires them to write. In our math courses, for example, students are required to explore a topic in math that they find engaging and write about this exploration in detail. A focus on writing throughout math has led to stronger mathematical vocabulary in our classrooms, which increases our access to opportunities to learn for all students. When asking the question of why do we IB, I immediately think of the IB learner profile, which is displayed on the screen. What I find so impactful about the IB learner profile is the theme of developing well-rounded students who are grounded yet open, passionate yet caring, and disciplined yet questioning. As any college-level course advertises, our students are learning rigorous concepts and applying them at high levels. However, unlike other programs, our students are also learning to see the world through different lenses, to search for understanding, and to discover their own identity and how it interacts with the rest of the world. We try to find diverse experiences for students that encourage them to discover their place in society, which means that they don't just survive beyond school, they thrive and will only try to make a difference. Experiences aligned with the IB learner profile act as both a window for students to see the world outside of themselves and as a mirror, asking students to reflect on their own experiences with new insight.
Hello, I'm Asia, a senior diploma program candidate. I will be attending The Ohio State University, majoring in journalism with a full ride distinction scholarship. During my freshman year, I was highly reluctant to challenge the opinions of others and express my own commentaries in fear of presenting the wrong answer. Now, due to the approach given within IB, I can comfortably risk expression of my thoughts, since I now understand there is no fine line with a right or wrong answer, and that the critical understanding of a topic is most important. These are some testimonials current IB students have shared. I plan to use what I know to test out of some college courses and give me a good foundation of knowledge and understanding going into college. The program is available for students district-wide due to the lottery process. This opportunity is very important to me because I do not come from a wealthy family. It's an incredible learning experience. It has allowed me to draw connections between what would ordinarily be much more separate classes and the concepts that they deal with. Furthermore, I have formed a cohesive relationship with the other students in the diploma program and generally learned to work both individually and as a group at the advanced level offered by IB. My perspective has changed drastically. I never really thought of what could be happening across the ocean or how, as a collective, we all affect each other. The IB diploma was a major reason that I chose to go to CAUSE. Otherwise, I might enroll exclusively in College Credit Plus.
Just as we ask students to be risk takers, the IB encourages teachers to do the same. Thus, we are continually offering new options for our students. Next year, we will offer IB Psychology for the first time. And just this year, we were one of the few schools in the nation to offer IB Art History. Our IB Social and Cultural Anthropology program is the only one of its kind in the state of Ohio. Our students have the opportunity to test out courses at a college level before entering university. We recognize the impact that the IB courses have on students' post-secondary success, and we are committed to providing CAUSE students with rigorous and relevant academic coursework. Each year, our students continue to thrive in the classroom, but more importantly, in the next steps of their journeys. Thank you for this opportunity for our community to show you why we, IB, at CAUSE. We welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Principal Sanders and Mrs. Foley. Good to see you both, and thank you for being here too, Asia. Are there any questions from board members, Mr. Vice President?
Yes, just one, and thank you so much for this outstanding presentation and the wonderful work that you're doing to ensure that we have college-ready and life-ready students. Thank you so much. I think as I listened to the presentation, the one thing that came to mind was how do we look at, if we haven't done so already, how do we look at developing a IB preparatory curriculum, something that introduces, I don't know if it's late elementary school, middle school, we introduce a early IB curriculum that allows students the opportunity to have some early access to this type of stuff and grow into that possibility, whether they come to CAUSE or maybe come somewhere else. I'd love to be able to see IB expanded throughout the district. I didn't know why the International Baccalaureate is not at Columbus North International School or some other places. But is there opportunity, or are we thinking about that at all as a way to take us to next, Mr. Superintendent?
Mr. President, to Mr. Cole, that has been a topic that we have explored over the years. Of course, one of the barriers, of course, is always the financial part of it. There are, if I'm not mistaken, there are elementary and middle school curriculums, for the IB program. And so that is something we can definitely continue to explore and see if we can develop partnerships that can make the expense of it something more affordable for the district to pursue as a part of a future endeavor.
I thank you so much, because I see this as a bigger part of not just curriculum and learning in the classroom, but this is also something that's about culture and climate in our buildings as well. Yeah. Because as much as it is a curriculum, it's also a lifelong philosophy. So I appreciate it and hope that we have the opportunity to use this as an apparatus that takes our students to next district-wide. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from board members? Board Member Reyes?
Thank you. My question centers around, sometimes when you are the only or one of the few, it's difficult to have access to other best practices or other organizations that are doing the same thing that you do. And that could make it difficult as you select what courses you increase or what courses you maybe get rid of. Do you feel that you have access to other districts and other best practice tools? And if not, is there anything we can do as a board to ensure that you have that access? That's a very long question, sorry.
Board President Baker, Board Vice President Cole, and Board Member Reyes, we are part of Ohio Network of International Baccalaureate Schools. So we are in collaboration with many schools within that IB Network, which affords us opportunity to receive professional development as well as become abreast on new practices and emergence of practice.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Are there any cause alumni at the table? Oh, Miss Gibbs.
Oh, wow. I mean, since you mentioned it, definitely want to thank you for your presentation. And Asia, you did a very wonderful job. Thank you. You will have no problem speaking up, I'm sure, in your next 4 years. I look forward to reading your bylines in a national newspaper or magazine pretty soon. But to the point of Board Member Reyes, where do you see, or what would you like to see this program grow into? And what is your vision for my dear alumni? And where do you see it going in your student body? In the ultimate, if money was no issue, where would you like to see it go?
Board President Baker, Vice President Cole, and Board Member Gibbs, I think it's already been shared. My hope and dream was that we would have a pipeline for IB. We do believe it is necessary to have an early year program as well as a middle year program to feed into our high schools so that our students are not experiencing IB for the first time when they walk in the doors of COS. So that would be my hope and dream if I had a blank check.
Well, we're little short of blank checks, but what we do have is long-range planning and an opportunity to have innovative and new programs. And as we look at where we're going to maybe sunset some programs, we can definitely think about where we might do some new things. And would you please introduce the other staff that are with you?
Glad to. I would like all of my staff members to stand. We have a stellar cause team here. We have Dr. Velo, who serves as our IB coordinator. We have Aaron Moore, assistant principal. We have Michelle Lewis, assistant principal. And we have Samantha Smith, who serves as our career connections internship coordinator. And we have Miss Webb. And what is unique about Miss Webb? Miss Webb is a cause alum. She also is a full diploma student. She is a recipient of the whole IB program, and she now teaches at COS.
That's all I have.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
Just proud.
Thank you very much for being here this evening. Thank you. Dr. Stanford?
Mr. President, members of the board, that concludes the interim superintendent report for this evening.
Thank you very much. And if there are no other questions for Dr. Stanford, we will move on to the internal auditor. Madam Internal Auditor, have you anything to share with the board this evening?
Thank you, President Baker, board members. I don't have a report, but I would like to announce that Audit and Accountability will be meeting next Thursday, April the 26th at 3:30 in the Cabinet Room. And one of the items to go over will be the recently released district financial report. So hopefully you can join us for that.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the internal auditor? Thank you. Let's move on then to our treasurer. Mr. Treasurer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Baker. Members of the board, tonight we're going to review, or I'm going to review very briefly, and touch upon the highlights of the March 2018 monthly financial report that was reviewed by the Finance and Appropriations Committee last Thursday. Total revenues have returned to their favorable position, running ahead of plan by about 3.8% year-to-date through March. Expenditures continue to run under plan through year-to-date so far about 2.7% under, which is very similar to last month. Looking at some of the revenue details, on the property taxes, we did receive settlement in March for the first half tax collections, and this brought the year-to-date variance to about $19 million above plan, or about plus 4%. We don't anticipate any further activity this year in real estate receipts, so that favorable variance should carry forward to the end of the year. We did discuss, and there are in the management discussion and analysis notes that go along with the financial statement, some of the pieces and parts that went together to drive that variance, one of which is we believe that in part due to the changes in the federal tax code and the rush to pay the full year taxes in December of last year, that we've had a little bit of a shift, robbing some of the collections from August and moving them forward to March. So we've adjusted that into the forecast, but that's one of several explanations for that variance. For property tax collections, the property tax allocation, there was no real activity there. We are anticipating that rollback number to come in next month, or actually this month in April. Other revenues continue to have a favorable variance year to date. However, there is an anticipation of a fairly large Medicaid reimbursement in June, but we actually already received that, so that should work out, and this line item should come much closer to plan by year end. That pretty much summarizes revenue overall. We will be up for the year in overall revenues, which is what we anticipate through our conservative planning and forecasting, and that's good news. Being up in revenue over plan, that's good news. Moving on to expenditures, personnel continues to run under plan, about 2% year to date. We believe that this variance, which is about $8 million under plan, could rise to a little over $11 million by the end of the year. Again, that's conservative forecasting, and that's good news as well. The other thing we looked at was our appropriation for personnel. We have the plan for personnel, and then we have the actual annual appropriation. We believe that we will be within the annual appropriation, even though that was originally set before we had closed negotiations on our collective bargaining agreement. So we don't anticipate bringing an adjustment for the appropriation to the board at year end on this line item. We go to purchase services. They continue to run under plan. And that projection for the end of the year is about $2.4 million under plan. Again, perhaps a little bit larger than we would normally expect, but in that favorable direction. We looked also, as we do, at the charter schools and STEM and scholarship lines. As you know, those changed in February due to the closing of ECOT, and as those students re-enroll somewhere, that number can go up or down. And we have seen that even while I prepared the commentary for March, or for the March statement, the number had jumped to about 1.6 million increase in the deduction. It will still undoubtedly run under our plan for the year by about 7 million, and largely due to those changes in ECOT students. I do not believe all of them have re-enrolled somewhere, so they're not showing up in our deduction at this time. Supplies, materials continue to run under plan. We did discuss that. Budget Director Gooding discussed the appropriation, what's been encumbered, what's been spent to date, and his discussions with budget managers on that line. And I believe that most of that variance is due to timing, but from a budgetary standpoint, they are well encumbered to perhaps spend themselves out for the balance of the year. Looking further, capital outlay, as it has in the past, continues to run above plan for the year. We're projecting it to be about to hit about 3.3 million for the year, about 1.3 million above plan, but we've known that since pretty much the beginning of the year because of some carry forward expenditures on purchase orders that rolled forward from last year. And I think that pretty well, other objects, because of tax settlement, we did have the fees that are associated with that tax settlement come in. That brings us right on plan. It's just within $400,000 of plan, so that's very much on target. I did also at the committee share with them my projections line item by line item for the balance of the year, where we will be favorable by year end, but again, we always plan for that. As you recall, during our budget reductions, we factored that in, looking at that projected deficit. We immediately took approximately $60 million off the table because we do anticipate these favorable variances over the year. In addition to that, unless Board Member Peretti wants to comment on it, but I'll hastily tell you that we also reviewed the non-personnel budget for fiscal 19, at least in part. We will have another meeting, an additional meeting scheduled for the first Thursday in May. That date escapes me right now, but that will be to continue those discussions on the non-personnel budgets post our reduction activities. And then we had the first review with FAC on the 5-year forecast, wherein we've made all the adjustments relative to the favorable variances here. We'll have that presentation to the board for the first time on the forecast May 1st, and then you will be set to adopt the 5-year forecast on May 15th. Again, this is a May update, as we call it, because it's an update to the October 2017 forecast. The same time period is covered. We also looked at some longer range planning outside of the forecast to keep our minds set on those years and further out because of timing of receipts and just wanting to look longer term and consider levy cycle issues and really just to keep a very long-term perspective that goes beyond what we see in a 5-year forecast, because while 5 years is better than 1 year, you still do have the potential to be a little bit, and I'm going to use the word surprised for Board Member Gibbs because she doesn't like surprises. So as we trend that out a little bit further, we're actually looked at some numbers out to fiscal year 2025 to give you an idea of what these trends indicate and what will be on the horizon 3, 4, 5 years down the road potentially if our current revenue and expenditure patterns continue. And so you'll see in the 5-year forecast some of the scenarios that we've run, a little hurricane analysis, as I call it, especially when it comes to state revenues. But all of that, we covered the monthly financials, started on the non-personnel budget, covered the 5-year forecast, scheduled an additional meeting for the first part of May, and we're lining ourselves up for that May 1st meeting when we present the 5-year forecast update. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Any comments or questions from Mr. Peretti?
Just a comment. I just want to thank Mr. Bohort and Mr. Gooding for all their work in the committee going through this process as we continue to move through the realities of school funding. And like the Treasurer had said, we had looked through the first 5 years and then look, additional 10 years. As you know, we get an allowance from the state and we rely on property taxes to fund education. It's a very unstable way to fund something that should be a lot more stable. But it's one of those things that we find it very important to look at because there are realities, there are levies in the future that we have to think about. These are people's property taxes. These are the services that we're providing educationally for our kids. And quite frankly, the way that the state funds education right now, we continue to be on the losing end of that situation, whether it's the adjustment of the cap, which is formulaic position of where we are as a district. So it's very difficult. I've just noticed being on the board now for about almost 5 years, just a difference in an awareness when it comes to how our financial situation is currently and what affects that. I hear more and more people talking about the state and the legislature and how that affects us, because it very much does. And a stroke of a pen, the state going through tough times will take it out, and they have currently on public education. So we are just trying to elevate that conversation so that we're doing our job and being accountable with what we have, and so that we can promote the things that we're doing educationally that are special, that are good, and at the same time to shine a very bright light on what is going on and what causes a lot of these situations. What is the drain of charter schools a lot of the time on public education? What is the effect of the state changing our formula from 1 year to the next? It is very, very tough. So that's our goal here, is to continue to elevate this conversation, to talk about it. It's not fun, it's ugly, and we really need to continue to make sure that we advocate as a board and as a community to the legislature when they go and they plan for the next 2 years cycle and what's the formula going to be. It's going to change. When we looked at the scenarios, we're looking at several different legislatures. Those are some big unknowns that a school district has to try to account for. And for as precious as public education is, it's a very ridiculous way to plan something out for the long term. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Peretti. And I believe you were next, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. That was actually my question. When we're talking about looking at long run, 2022, 25, what variables, considering, 46+% of our budget comes from the state biennial budget, and we don't often know what that budget appropriation is going to be for us until the very last minute. I mean, literally. How do we, what exactly, what trends are we looking at? How do we actually plan that far out?
Thank you. Board Member Cole, what we do is really scenario analysis, and that is holding all the other variables constant. You change one variable and you see the impact that that has longer term. And the purpose of that is to put current year changes in the long-term perspective. So when we end this year and there's a favorable change, some might look at that and go, well, that seems like a lot of money, but when you look at it out towards 2025, you can see the impact that that has on reducing the potential need for further reductions and also reducing the need for a millage request. So if you keep that in that long-term perspective and do the scenario analysis of, well, if we assume, as we will in the 5-year forecast, unless you all tell me differently. I think FAC is on board with the forecast as it is. At plus 4% in the cap over the life of the forecast, and that's currently what we receive. We can trend that out using that same assumption, but I also ran it at plus 2%, so where state revenue increases would actually slow down. We experienced that already. We had assumed plus 7.5, and it came in at plus 4. So we can see where that takes us. We also ran a more favorable outlook, not putting on any probabilities on either, but just a more favorable outlook at, say, plus 6% after fiscal year 19. And that gives you a different picture. Correspondingly, a better balanced figure out in 2025 than in the other plus 2%. So we get a range and a picture, and what that gives us a feel for is, what can we tolerate? Do we respond with expenditures? Do we respond with revenues? If those state revenues don't come in, what does that mean we have to do locally to make up for that difference? So you have a context in which to evaluate your 2 or 3 choices: to increase revenue, to decrease expenditures, or the combination of the 2 of them. I think most telling in the presentation that I did just before the 5-year forecast, as I walked the committee through some timing issues relative to what years are covered in a 5-year forecast, how taxes are collected, what makes up a fiscal year. When you vote in a new levy, as we did in 16, what fiscal years, if you're on a 4-year levy cycle, is that intended to cover? And you suddenly realize that this isn't, if you're me, you already knew this, but for some, you realize that this isn't just 1 or 2 years at a time, that it is a much longer range perspective. Once you see that picture, you can put these changes really, I guess, into perspective and understand that what we did here recently with reductions was to actually shift our expenditure curve down. So it was a great effort to modify that growth pattern in our expenditures to help very early on address a very long-term need to stay within what we believe are forecastable resources. And it's really just a lot of scenario analysis and what-if analysis. You're right, we don't know, but we have to live in that world of uncertainty. So we look at these different alternatives, these different options, in our own minds, put some probability of where that is and decide when do we behaviorally respond to changes in our financial forecast. And I explained even this morning to our chiefs meeting about what level I'm comfortable with before I come back and say, we really need to do something on the expenditure side, or at what point, as you, the board, see this information, you can look there and hopefully through the charts and the graphs and the discussion, see when local revenue increases are going to be needed. And it's just, you plan it, you keep it in the forefront of your mind, and you consider it. And while we operate year to year, we plan a good 10 years down the road. I hope that answers your question.
Somewhat. I guess the other part of it then is how much in tandem is this dialogue with our administration in terms of the value-based aspect of this whole thing, right? Because if we're looking at this ambiguous environment that we're in financially, we do have some very clear values strategically as we look at where our gains are going to be academically and otherwise, facilities and otherwise. Are there other discussions where we could possibly look at shared, Mr. Cinziano, shared bond money for future developments, shared bond money between us and the city. We have a AAA bond rating, and we have a AA bond rating. So I just want to look at some different options here in this kind of ambiguous environment, but know very clearly from a value-based perspective what the other side of the table is saying, and then how do we prioritize that moving forward.
Board Member Cole, I would say that in the last couple of weeks of discussions that Dr. Stanford and I had collectively, we very much have married the academic programmatic planning and the needs there, and I would not want to steal Dr. Stanford's thunder, because I think he is both in writing and in speech to the chiefs eloquently expressed a very focused and targeted approach that we will need to take to, and I'm going to use the phrase, accelerate our academic performance while achieving some financial sustainability. Again, looking at the context, understanding that it's uncertain, but realizing that we've got this academic path that we must go down, and by putting it in context and realizing how things financially might change, we know what kind of reactions we may have to face down the road should the state change their behavior, or if, God forbid, we get into another 2008 economic crisis. We know it's there. We try and plan for the best, but just being aware so that we aren't surprised when those changes come down the road and we get an idea of the magnitude. But our discussions are very much intertwined. And we do, I don't know how else to explain it other than that, Mr. Gooding has often talked about how the program drives the budget. That's what all those budget discussions are about. And perhaps more so than ever before, I believe Dr. Stanford and I will be hitting hard on the tying that program to really drive this and put it out there and say, if we want to do this acceleration of academic performance, we're going to have to be aware of what we need to do financially to sustain and support that.
I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Sorry for putting you on blast there, Mr. Stenziano.
Thank you. And Ms. Gibbs, I believe you were next.
Thank you. Treasurer Bahurk, I have a quick question. On slide 7, under the supply line, you mentioned a comment that we're at about 15 versus 12% plan to year-to-date actual. And you mentioned that most of them have been encumbered. So I guess my question is, in terms of supplies, do our staff, do our teachers have what they need, or are they waiting until the end of the year to get them, and then they need to use them for the next year? So if it's encumbered, do they not have them?
Okay.
Yeah,
I was making sure you were done.
No, it's the question. We have a gap in our supplies.
Right.
You're saying they're encumbered, which means not necessarily spent yet. So is there a lag time between the time our staff is getting the supplies they requested, and do they have what they need? Or, I mean, are they going to get it in time for this year, or are they buying at the end of the year and they won't get to use it until next year?
To the extent that there are current needs, there is appropriation there. Obviously, you can see it in the financials. There's current appropriation there that those expenditures could be made. But often there's a kind of a combination of this typical purchasing cycle. You purchase or order at the end of this year to have supplies available at the very beginning of the next year. So there's a portion of that activity going on as well. But we typically always know that there's going to be an encumbrance at the end of the year relative to supplies. And then during the year, there are ongoing expenditures that occur. Right now, I couldn't speak to the existing expenditures as of March. I mean, we are entering that time of year where we're beginning to stop the ordering process. So they may very well be, shall we say, bulking up on orders that get into place before we shut down the purchasing process for the end of the fiscal year and the end of the school year. So they may very well represent much what is encumbered that might come in and get expended, but will probably be on hand to start the next school year. So that's where we are at this point, given that it's the middle of April.
Okay. Have we looked, and maybe I would encourage my colleague, Board Member Peretti, and maybe send it to FAC to look at, are we
using the best practices in terms of when they're ordering and when they're getting their supplies, just as a FYI or a suggestion, to make sure our teachers and our staff have what they need. And if it's, and really not hypothetically thinking about it, but knowing for sure that they have the supplies needed in hand when they need it. And if there are some other processes we may improve or add a bit of a efficiency to make sure that if it's indeed for next year, then that's what it is. But not that everyone is just holding out and there's some other type of kind of you wait to spend the money till we have it, and that it's not that type of deal. For whatever it is, I would like to see us look at that process to make sure everybody has what
I'll
they
share
need.
that with,
We have been continuing, like, I think we have a discussion, every time about this, and a lot of the line item is a lot of other things as well inside it. Gas, when purchasing gas and fuel is part of that line item. I think some software purchases, because it's something that I bring up all the time. You know, you hear about it, you see it online, you see it on social media. When you don't want to see our teachers having to spend their dollars and getting more and more stuff. So it's not entirely, that's not the whole line item. It's other things, but it is something since I've been on the board that has trended. We have spent lower than what's been appropriated. What's been a focus of ours, and we do need to continue to what is the real behavior on that specific piece that's going on there. I think that we need to continue to discuss it. I was just talking about our finance committee recently, and I had a desire to make sure that we had folks from CEA and OPSI to come and start sitting in our meetings, and on the finance committee is what I would really like to desire, so that when we do have these pieces come up, that we can also have some dialogue with those folks that it affects more than anything. Is
So
important
to my question, and thank you for that, so maybe you can share with us at a different time, but to that point, when you bring it back, I would like to also see the feedback from our CEA, from OPSI, from the administrators, and to see where, and Dr. Stanford, if you can bring that to us, and whichever way it bubbles up, either through the board or through their.
There's nobody there.
Oh, no, I'm not asking, I'm not asking for representation. What I'm asking for is when you bring us back a report, or when you just follow back up on this question, Mr. Bohoric, if you can just let us know and the work that you've already done, and however you gain feedback into the process, just share it with us at a later date. That would just help me be more informed about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the Treasurer's report? Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Does that conclude your report?
Oh, yes, it does. I'm sorry. That concludes my brief report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's move on then, assuming there's nothing else for the Treasurer, to item 7.1, update and resolution of intent to sell Indianola Middle School. As we know, the district has several long-standing partnerships with The Ohio State University. Tonight's item originally appeared on our agenda in September when we approved the direct sale of Indianola Middle School to The Ohio State University pending agreement on an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. After we approved the intent resolution in the fall, negotiations continued but stalled because of two primary issues: the time period for closing on the property and language in the MOU regarding the partnership between the district and Ohio State on the future educational use of the building and Columbus School's ability to be part of the conversation. In an effort to accommodate OSU, the purchase contract has been revised to allow for additional time for closing in exchange for Ohio State paying the district a monthly maintenance fee. The only outstanding issue now is with respect to the district's ability to weigh in on the future educational use of the building. The university has given the board its final language regarding district involvement in the current Memorandum of Understanding. That language now reads, OSU shall give consideration to the Columbus City Schools as a provider of K-12 educational opportunities at the Indianola Middle School site. Tonight's resolution reoffers the sale of Indianola Middle School to Ohio State based on the new language in the revised MOU. Before we vote on the matter, I would like to allow speakers the opportunity to speak, and then I'd like the board to have a discussion on the matter. First, however, I'd like to invite Ann Lanzotti, our Director of Real Estate, to give us all a brief summary of how we got to where we are tonight. And Ann is joined here this evening by outside legal counsel for real estate matters, Mr. Ryan Aiello. Welcome, Ms. Lanzati. The floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, and members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you a little history on Indianola Middle School. As we all know, Indianola Middle School itself has a very long and valuable history with the Central Ohio community. Excuse me, I won't share all of that with you, but just the more current relevant history that relates to what got us here today. And so that starts in 2015 for the district, when district staff worked with DeYoung Richter and the ad hoc committee that was chaired by Board Member Gibbs and Board Member Peretti to update the facility master plan for the district. The updated facility master plan was approved by the board in June of 2016. As a part of that process, all non-school buildings were assessed and reviewed to determine if there was any potential future district use that could be imagined for a property. 11 buildings at the time were identified that they had no potential future district use that could be conceived of at the time then. So in September of 2016, the board declared 11 properties as surplus and available for sale. So the next step that we did was per the Ohio Revised Code, just to summarize the process that's required in 3313.41, the board must first offer all properties that we want to sell, land or buildings, to charter schools for 60 days at no more than appraised value. So we got appraisals done on all 11 properties, and the appraisal for Indianola Middle School came in at $2,350,000. The board then offered in February of 2017 all the properties to the charter schools per the Ohio Revised Code, and that time period went from February to April of 2017. Around the same time, I think, is when I first met with representatives from Ohio State who had expressed an interest in purchasing Indianola Middle School. After the charter school period, the law allows the board two options as a next step. One is to offer properties at public auction, and the other is to offer them directly for sale to certain allowable public entities, such as the City of Columbus or public universities. So Ohio State qualifies in that category. So we started talking to OSU, and in September of 2017, the board passed the resolution offering to sell the property to OSU, and which was not signed, and we continued negotiations after that. So as a final point, quick one, I would say that of the 11 properties that were offered, 6 have already been sold and have generated $19 million in proceeds for the district. So Ryan and I are available for any questions.
Are there questions from board members at this time? My question is, are there questions from board members at this time prior to hearing public testimony? Yes. Mr. Peretti.
So maybe you could walk us through some of the changes in the MOU and what the district, our position was, and how that sort of evolved as the MOU sort of progressed. I was on board when yes, of course, partner up with OSU, it's fantastic. We would love to be able to help you out educationally, and we have great staff and great resources. We'd love to be, part of the conversation, not tell you what to do, but at least be that, continue to build that partnership with the Ohio State. I was all about it, but then I guess I'm just a little confused. It seemed like sort of that was maybe a sticking point that caused some of the changes. So maybe you could kind of explain this is something that I thought we were done with a long time ago. So maybe I need a little help understanding what was the sticking point and the things that were changing in that memorandum.
I'm going to ask Ryan to address that. He's worked more closely with the Memorandum of Understanding.
Sure. President Baker, Vice President Cole, and Board Member Peretti. So I guess what I can do is walk through, I've sent you sort of a chronology of some of these events and how the language has changed. I'll try and explain the best I can sort of where it started and where we ended up. Obviously, there's some back and forth here, versions going back to OSU, back to us, with requested changes. So I guess initially the first version that we were comfortable with, and I'm not sure if it was generated internally with Columbus Schools or as with a combination of Columbus Schools and OSU, but that language was that, oh yeah, yep.
So that language, that original language, that was a collaboration, or was that, how was that formulated, is what I'm curious on. How do we not know?
Yes, so the first MOU was presented to me by Columbus Schools Administration, and we went back and forth on the language that we wanted in there. So that was the first version that I sent to OSU, which said we would mutually agree upon the ultimate educational use. So that's where we started. The next version, so that went to OSU, and then in around October, it came back with that language stricken, and there was some language added that said Ohio State University and Columbus Schools would work as partners to collaborate on the educational use. Then in November, we had a response back to OSU, and this, I think, focused on some of the discussions that were had at the original September board meeting. And so we inserted back in some language that said, Columbus City Schools shall have the sole and exclusive right to be the provider of any educational opportunities or services at the school. Then in December, we got a response back from OSU that said, Ohio State University shall first look to Columbus Schools as a preferred provider of K through 12 educational opportunities. And then recently, we've asked OSU for what their final offer is on the language, and that came back as the Ohio State University shall give consideration to Columbus City Schools as a provider. So that's kind of the back and forth. We've ended up with the, that they'll give consideration for Columbus Schools as a provider.
And why was and going just back in time, how did we get the first MOU? Why wasn't that prepared ahead of time? So when we were first dealing with this issue, I'm just kind of concerned that, not all parties were on the same page when the resolution originally came to the district. Do you know what was going on with the communication back and forth and how that happened?
President Baker, Vice President Cole, Board Member Peretti. In September, the resolution authorized the sale contingent on OSU signing the purchase contract. And here at the board meeting, there was an amendment by Judge Brown to add in the requirement of the MOU. The contract was then amended to say that the MOU would be agreed upon by the time of closing.
All right, so before we take public testimony, any other comments or questions briefly from board members? Seeing none? Oh, Ms. Okay, very good. All right, so I appreciate everyone's patience who's here tonight on this matter. Thank you both very much. We may call you back up. All right, first speaker I have is the Honorable Michael Stenziano. Would you please approach the podium? And you have 4 minutes, sir. Thank you very much for being here tonight, Councilman.
Thank you, President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the Board of Education. I'm not sure I should have been the first speaker because I think you'll hear some better context, but do appreciate the opportunity to be here. For those that don't know me, Michael Stenziano, member of Columbus City Council, university resident and proud father of Cooper, who is just finishing the year in pre-K at Hubbard Elementary. You have wonderful faculty, wonderful support staff at Hubbard, and just to see his growth, very proud of that. So thank you all for your support of Hubbard. Matter at hand, I am here in support of the community's wishes. As you all are aware, we often talk about the Columbus Way, where we're able to take different entities, work together for our community's best interests. And the university community has been very outspoken. And as School Board Member Preddy pointed out, there really wasn't a controversy when we were here last September discussing this building would be used for an educational purpose. And while I can appreciate, and I know we have some lawyers on the board, and I'm a lawyer myself, it sounds like we've gotten a little off course. And so really encourage that collaboration with Ohio State, with Columbus City Schools, and with the university organizations can go forward. I know how important this facility and the vision for this building is for the community, and so came to express that support. As was highlighted earlier, and President Baker, the excitement and enthusiasm at West High School last week was second to none, and truly feel that while you all took that responsibility, you heard from the community support. And I think this is somewhat similar in that the community is truly wanting to see a building, a point of pride for the community to be reused and to be maximized for its potential. And so with that activity, and Councilmember Gibbs, I know we were just wowed by not only the enthusiasm, but just how important that investment was, and think this partnership should go forward and be truly a partnership to highlight not only Columbus Way, Columbus City Schools' commitment, but also in response to the community's request for support and future use of the facility. As always, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Happy to answer any questions, although I know we have a number of other speakers.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any clarifying questions at this time? And I should say, board action requested is support the community's position relative to Indianola Middle School. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Appreciate it. All right, next speakers, and I believe these two individuals have agreed to come up together and address us jointly. Tell me if I'm wrong about that. Trudy Bartley and Keith Myers. Please approach the podium. Topics: Indianola Middle School. Approve the sale of Indianola Middle School to OSU, and an update on Indianola Middle School. So, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Pahort, Auditor Smith, members of the board, Dr. Stanford. My name is Keith Myers. I represent the Office of Planning and Real Estate at The Ohio State University, and we're very pleased and excited to be here tonight, and thank you for your consideration of our purchase of the Indianola Middle School. Ohio State University and Columbus School Board have a long history of partnerships, successful partnerships, and the university is committed to building on these partnerships with the ultimate development of the Indianola Middle School. We also have a very strong commitment to the University District neighborhood and all the neighborhoods immediately around the university. We've worked very hard to make sure that those neighborhoods are successful. They remain diverse communities that are welcoming to all. And I think the future of the Indianola Middle School will help in that regard. We're also very conscious of the sort of social, cultural, historical, and architectural importance of the school, the building, and the site. And it's an aggressive undertaking to think about a future of a building that is that important and is frankly in that state of repair, which is not great. So with that, I think we're happy to answer any questions this evening. We're very pleased to be here. And again, we thank you for your consideration of our purchase.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Trudy Bartley, Government Affairs, The Ohio State University. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to discuss with you the potential sale of Indianola Middle School to The Ohio State University. As we said from the very beginning in September, we look at this as a community asset and a community benefit. We always went in with the intent of collaboration, not only with the district, but also with the University Area Commission, as well as Wyland Park. You have seen in the past, as far as what the Ohio State University's commitment has been to the Wyland Park area through our Wyland Park Collaborative. What you've seen over the past 20 years has been amazing as far as the revitalization of that neighborhood, and we believe that this asset, being Indianola Middle, is another opportunity to really show our commitment. We have been very integral with the district as far as what you have seen over on the Near East Side with the Health Sciences Academies, with East High School, Champion Middle School, and the 5 elementary schools, which at one point in time were in some kind of educational emergency, and now what you're seeing, particularly at Champion, is we have a waiting list. We have been very intentional as far as bringing resources, funding to that school, as far as being able to have those youth have the opportunities and the experience working with COSI, having COSI on wheels. And I'm hoping that with the funding that you receive from ODLOTS as far as coming to Champion Middle School for the $300,000 was due to the fact of the work that we have exhibited within Champion Middle School. So as you can say, we not only have had the opportunity to work with not only the Near East Side, but we're also beginning to work on the Linden community with Hamilton Middle School. So this is something that we want to again exhibit, particularly within the Wyland Park area, understanding that there is an opportunity to create a feeder pattern that currently doesn't exist for our youth there. We've always said that there would be a potential opportunity for an educational purpose, and that we would collaborate and partner with the district on that moving forward. So there's never been a wavering with that, with our commitment, and we're just asking for the opportunity to purchase that, those 5 acres and that building from a revitalization and historic standpoint, to be able to, again, give it the historic integrity that it has had in the past and what it can have for the future. And thank you.
Thank you. Are there any clarifying questions from board members for Ms. Bartley or Mr. Myers? Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Trudy, it's good to have you back again and have an opportunity to address this sale. And it is a significant matter for this community, for Columbus Schools, and I know for The Ohio State University. Back in September, after we had had some private meetings and talked about our interest, the school's interest in seeing that educational uses there, that Columbus Schools would be a part of that conversation. When you came in September, you made some very similar representations to what you've just made. My suggestion at that point, and we did adopt that unanimously as part of our resolution in September, was that we take those representations and put them down on paper. We were all, we believed, on the same page. We wanted to ensure that that Columbus Schools could participate in those conversations and discussions with respect to educational uses for the property, and have that opportunity then to make sure that it was also something, from our perspective, that worked for the neighborhood and for the community. We passed that resolution, as I said, contingent upon working that out in the form of a memorandum of understanding. And those discussions over the last 7 months, more than 7 months now, have involved a lot of back and forth about language. Unfortunately, and this is where I'm disappointed, not only has the final document, at least the Ohio State University's version of the final document, not contain that language, it's backtracked. It's essentially as I would view it on some of the language, a reneging of those kinds of representations that were made. And I think that's unfortunate. The language that we had in our resolution of September 5, I thought was pretty clear, and it was clearly based upon the conversations that we'd had and then the public representations that you made that evening. I am not saying at this point that I won't support a sale to The Ohio State University. I just want to hear your explanation for why the language has changed to the point that no longer is there language about collaborating or that Columbus Schools would be a preferred provider and some of that kind of thing, to simply that The Ohio State University will consider us as things go forward, basically leaving the matter in essentially the same posture as if you simply bought it outright without any of this language. I do understand and appreciate that you and the university have the best interest of the community in mind, and that I expect that OSU will operate in good faith and do things that are both collaborative with us and in the best interest of the neighborhood and the community. But the language just doesn't take us there as it was originally intended to do.
Well, the language changed from what its original intent was from the district back to us. We said it, so what we're saying right now is the Ohio State University, Columbus City Schools, and the University Area Commission will collaborate on educational opportunities that meet the mission of all partners and result in the success of students, teachers, and Columbus residents, including but not limited to the development of a 612 or pre-K-12 school, and the Ohio State University will give first consideration to Columbus Schools as provider of K-12 education opportunities at the Indianola Middle School site. When we said that at first, we said that we would be your partner. Then you came back and changed and said you wanted to be the exclusive provider of those services, and that is something that our board could not agree to. So that's why we went back and forth with our different attorneys, ours being Ice Miller and yours being Densmore, as far as the language. The other thing that we had issue with, and we discussed it with Ann Lanzotti, was we understood completely that you needed operational dollars, $7,000 that you asked for per month. But what we did ask for was an itemization of what those particular line items were, and we never received that. We were not resistant to providing those funds, but as you have an auditor, we have an auditor as well, who is going to look at those line items and ask, what are these particular items for? When we are audited as far as the funding that we give to Columbus City Schools for that. So right now, it's gone from $7,000 to $9,000 that you've requested. We've agreed to it. But our question was, what is it for? And we never received that information back. So those are the two items that you've asked about. One was, we are saying we're going to be collaborative as far as the educational purposes that serve the students and the residents in Wyland Park, and that you will be a part of that. Not only will you be a part of that, but the residents of the University Area Commission and Wyland Park will be a part of that, as well as we are willing, and we said we would, provide $9,000 until the closing costs for maintenance costs and operational costs that you have. That may be mowing, that may be what some of the issues that you may have as far as maintenance, but we were willing to do that. But as I said, there were those sticking points where we said we would like to see what these costs are for.
Maybe we can get a response from our folks about this as well.
Sure.
on that
Sure.
point.
On that point, I think it would be good to hear from our folks. On the first point, with respect to the language, I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think that the language has moved away from the representations that you had made back in September on the 5th, away from the language of the resolution that we had adopted unanimously, and away from the initial drafts. And it has, I think that that's unfortunate and disappointing, but I think that, if this is something that the community is good with, and not having those protections in writing as part of this, but is instead satisfied with the representations that you're making now, I think this can probably proceed. But with respect to the cost, the second item, we can hear from our folks.
That's fine.
Are there any other questions, clarifying questions for either Trudy Bartley or Keith Myers from board members, clarifying questions of these two speakers? Seeing one, Mr. Peretti?
Clarifying questions, comment, this is really exciting. This is a great sort of move, partnering with OSU, and we were really excited, and I share the frustrations. I'm not, I'm supportive of it. I just wasn't supportive of, putting the welcome mat out for the district for charter schools. I want us. You have to understand where we're coming from. I want us to help be a partner with you. I don't want to tell you what to do, but that's how I felt, as a board member, going through this situation, quite frankly.
Is there a question?
No, it's
Okay.
a comment.
All right.
Oh, am I not?
Ms. Bartley?
Would it make a difference if we were to change the language back to preferred provider?
Colleagues?
Sure.
We can do that.
All right, so
Okay. That's because they're
So we
talking out of
have,
school.
all right, so yeah, one at a time. So Ms. Bartley has offered to, Ms. Hudson.
I just want to say, as what while we were reading, we were looking, because it didn't seem to align with what we saw in our materials. And I think we've got
Now, but that's what we were looking at, is whether or not the MOU we had in our materials was matching up with what you read.
So what I have is the last executed copy that we have.
And that's what ours was labeled as well, and I think it was. We
Okay.
were reading, but we picked up where it was.
Okay.
But I'm sorry for the. So the question for us was, it wouldn't make a difference.
But we're good now? So Ms. Bartley has just made an offer to us, and Mr. Brown?
I appreciate your willingness to make that change and insert that word. There are a couple of other changes that I am going to request and suggest that are not substantive in any way. They are strictly technical and typographical. But, and I don't it surprises me that, we're at this point and still have them. I'll tell you briefly what they are. Number one, the document should not be named MOU, but should be named Memorandum of Understanding. Number two, factually, in the second paragraph, under Indianola Middle School, it says that Howard Dwight Smith would later go on to be the architect of the Ohio Stadium. The fact is that he did Ohio Stadium before he did this school, so it should say was also the architect. Number 3, the next section is entitled The Ohio State University and Campus Partners. Campus Partners has no role whatsoever and is not otherwise mentioned, and that should be stricken from the title. And finally, in the conclusion, the last sentence spells principles improperly and omits the word "its" before commitment to partnerships. And if you're agreeable to those, do you have them all?
Oh, definitely.
I'm just surprised at this level and the amount of scrutiny that's taken place, that those remain.
I'm going to blame it on attorneys.
All right. So we have asked our clarifying questions. So I think when we go to make a motion on this, we can revisit what you offered, and maybe we can assume that you're amenable to the inclusion of the
Yes.
minor items that Mr. Brown just mentioned.
Yes, we are.
Okay, very good. Any other clarifying questions from board members for these two speakers? We do have one more set of speakers, and then we'll come back and actually make a motion. Yes, Ms. Gibbs.
No, thank you for presenting. I want to save my questions for you. I'm very eager to hear from the community and any remaining speakers from the community. And while I'm not even going to speak to that, I just want to hear from the community.
Okay, very good. So seeing no others, thank you very much, Ms. Bartley and Mr. Myers. Yes. So the last group, I believe you have all agreed to come to the podium and maybe have appointed a representative. I'll read your names. Please approach. You're all here to speak about Indianola Middle School. Becky West, Joe Motil, Matthew Hansen, Debbie Supalak, Tom Betty. Board action, they're all requesting the board move forward with the direct sale to OSU, approve the sale, complete the sale, approve the agreement. Please approach the podium. Good evening.
Good evening. We have not agreed to speak together.
Okay.
If that's all right. Should we go in order or?
All right.
That's okay. Okay.
Let's
Thank
just
you.
go in order then. Becky West, you're going to go first.
Thank you. Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Bahorak, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Dr. Stanford. Thank you for the opportunity. I am Becky West, Executive Director of Columbus Landmarks, and I have been granted the authority to speak tonight on behalf of our board and our 1,000 members. Columbus Landmarks advocates for historic preservation, and we were present at the September 2017 Board of Education meeting where you voted to proceed with the sale of Indianola Middle School to Ohio State. We publicly applauded your decision. We noted that Columbus City Schools has been a model district for reusing and sensitively rehabilitating historic school buildings. We considered the sale of the surplus Indianola Middle School to Ohio State, whose representatives have made a commitment to the building's long-term reuse, a win for historic preservation, for the neighborhood, and the community at large. 7 months later, and going on 8 years of vacancy, the sale and transfer is now complicated by the proposed Memorandum of Understanding, mandating continued involvement in the creation, development, and operation of an educational opportunity on the site. In the spirit of cooperative partnerships, is this an earnest approach or an off-putting tactic? And should Ohio State not agree to this mandate, will a similar arrangement be expected of other potential buyers? We know that vacancy and unconditioned space is not good for the structure and increases the challenges of rehabilitation. The rainy season is upon us, and we are extremely concerned about multiplying damage and deterioration. We urge you to be good stewards and expedite the transfer of this important architectural, historical, and landmark to Ohio State. We do not wish to feature Indianola Middle School on our most endangered buildings list ever again. Please move forward. Please move ahead with this important save. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. West. Are there any clarifying questions from Ms. West from board members? Seeing none, do I see someone on crutches? Would anyone mind if he goes next?
It's not a stunt. Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, and members of the board. My name is Tom Betty, and I'm a downtown resident with no children yet. Why do I care? I care because I served on the district's Neighborhood School Development Partnership Ad Hoc Committee and believe that the surest path to a bright economic future for all is through the classroom door. What did I learn? I learned as a member of that committee that the school district reaches out to the community for ideas, collaboration, and honest dialogue and how to retain families for the district, improve their delivery of education, meet the diverse needs of many socioeconomic groups, and inspire educational endeavors at the most grassroots level with the hopes of preparing all children in the district for higher education. I do believe you listen to our community. And I'm going to go off script here and say we are really, really close to having a deal. So when the opportunity arises for you to partner with the preeminent university, steeped into the traditions of having been created as a land-grant institution, you can make an enormous difference in the lives of the children in a neighborhood, or the children of the North Side, or even children all over the city. What can happen at Indianola could be transformative if everyone works collaboratively to plan what could be and to bring different strengths to the table. Those of us who volunteer our time to serve on committees for the school do so because we believe in public education, and I believe that the Columbus schools should conclude the sale of the Indianola building to Ohio State so that real work of planning, building, and delivering education can be started to help children and the community at large. This building is an educational treasure and a historic Columbus landmark that deserves to be saved. Being a product of public schools in the Northeast Ohio area, where all of my school buildings had cinder block walls that resembled a bunker or a prison, I can attest that the school environment of a unique building such as this enhances the educational experience for students. Indianola does just this with its architecture and its history. I implore this board to work through whatever reservations you have with Ohio State University and ensure that this building's future is in education, not a private venture such as residential housing. I am confident that this board can work out a shared agreement, hopefully tonight, to provide future educational uses within Indianola together. This can be a win-win for all parties. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Betty. Are there any questions, clarifying questions from board members? Thank you very much for coming down. We know it wasn't easy. Hopefully you took the elevator, not the steps. Next is Joe Motil. Come on up. How are you? Good evening. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Better put my glasses on. Okay. President Baker, Vice President Cole, Dr. Stanford, members of the school board. Joe Motil, I reside at 167 West Cook Road in Columbus. I'm a former resident of the University District, and I'm currently a member of the Council of Historic Neighborhoods, Clintonville Area Commission's Historic Building Subcommittee, and a former vice chairman of the Columbus Historic Resources Commission. As a longtime preservationist and lifelong resident of Columbus, I'm really tired of witnessing the loss of our neighborhood's historic fabric and its identity. And whether it's a Frank Packard designed mansion, an African-American funeral home, an historic public project, housing project on our east side, the historic Pavey Block in the University District, or the Clinton Theater and Clinton Annex in my neighborhood of Clintonville. Demolishing this historic school building in the central city really makes no sense. And with the ongoing resurgence of Italian Village, Wineland Park, and increased home ownership in the University District neighborhoods like Sohud, Iuka Ravine, Glen Echo Historic District, It is important to those who are raising families in these and other areas of the University District to be provided nearby educational choices and opportunities for their children. Good quality neighborhood schools are a main ingredient in creating sustainable, social, and economically thriving communities, and we all know that. This 11 acres of land and the school building are much more valuable asset to this community than it would be if a developer got their hands on it and continued to add to increased infrastructure, traffic, and lowering the overall quality of life to the most highest densely populated neighborhood in the city of Columbus. So I respectfully ask the board to follow through on its resolution and the memorandum of understanding, and that the purchase of this school building and its property be granted to The Ohio State University. I would also like to thank School Member Brown for his comments, because as I listened to the changes and things that were being said by the previous speaker, I too felt like this thing sounded like it was where it should have been, and then it went downhill from there. And it sounded like people were just flexing their muscles around here and needed to come to an agreement. And I don't know, and it's kind of shocking. And for the amount of money that you guys pay for your attorneys, I'm surprised that they didn't see half the stuff in there. But I would also, if I may, like for those who are here this evening to please stand up or show your hands that are in support of this. So you know that we have a great deal of support from the community here this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions for Mr. Motil? Thank you very much. Matthew Hansen, you are our next speaker. Evening.
Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, and members of the board. My name is Matthew Hansen. I'm the Executive Director of the University District Organization. The University District Organization has been a community planning consortium working to improve the University District for over 30 years. UDO has collaborated with the City of Columbus, Ohio State University, and the University Area Commission to study and make development recommendations for rapidly evolving neighborhoods. These efforts have led to the preservation of significant structures like Indianola Middle, creation of 4 historic districts, and 2 national historic districts. UDO believes that the preservation of Indian Middle School and its 11 acres of green space for community or educational use is important in achieving the development goals set in the city-adopted 2015 University District Plan. Repurposing the school for something other than a community or educational use will have significant impacts on the surrounding housing and infrastructure. We encourage Columbus Board of Education to move forward with the sale of Indianola Middle to the Ohio State University, and that all parties continue to work in good faith to do what's best for our families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any clarifying questions from board members for Mr. Hansen? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here. Next speaker is Debbie Supalak.
My name is Susan Colbert. I'm with OSU Extension. I'm here at the invitation of Trudy Bartley. I just want to reinforce and remind you all of what we came here on September 5th to talk about. It's very important that you understand that Indianola Middle School represents more than bricks and mortar. There are children, youth, and adults and families that are affected in Wyland Park by this school. And not only in Wyland Park, throughout the university area, as well as throughout the city of Columbus. This collaboration between the Ohio State University and the Columbus Board of Education is an awesome opportunity. It's an awesome opportunity. And like I said, I hope and pray that you all don't let legalese and technical, difficulties or, I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of what we're here for and the impact that ownership of the school can have on these families. When the school was closed, it had a profound negative impact on the children, youth, and adults and families in Wyland Park, as well as throughout the community. And we have an opportunity here to make it right, to help the families and serve as a premier educational institution, not only in the neighborhood, but throughout the city of Columbus. You have an opportunity where you have The Ohio State University, a world-renowned university that wants to purchase this building and make it something that could be replicated and modeled throughout the country. And so on that note, I just implore you all, as educators, as professionals, not to lose sight of these families. Millions of dollars has been invested in Wyland Park to transform that community, which was formerly a neighborhood of last resort, into a neighborhood of choice where families want to live, work, worship, or attend school. And so on that note, I please implore you not to lose sight of that and the amount of money and time and trouble and lives that have been spared and invested in, to make this a community that we can all be proud of. And not only the community, the city at large. So, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matthew Adair. I'll be super brief. We'll share our time. President Baker, Vice President Cole, board members, I'm a 9-year resident of the University District. I'm a co-chair of the Housing Committee for the Wyland Park Community Civic Association, which is our resident group. So I just wanted to come here on behalf and express our support for this transaction. Ohio State's been an integral partner with the collaborative, investing in Wyland Park for years, millions of dollars. And also I wanted to recognize the co-location of the Schoenbaum Family Center with Wyland Park Elementary and how big of a success that has been. So I hope that this transaction will move forward so that this building can represent another opportunity like that to help the University District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darby.
Thank you. Thank you, President Baker. Deb Supalak had to leave, so you were sort of miscuing there, I think, without realizing it. President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Stanford. I'm Doreen Uhas Sauer, and I chair the University Area Commission. And I want to probably just shorten my remarks a lot by saying that behind me, when people stood up, what you had were people from Wyland Park, Glen Echo, Tuttle Park, Iuka Ravine, Indianola Forest, the University Community Association, the University District Organization, the University Area Commission, people who had served on the University District Education Task Force, which was a separate task force formed out of the Area Commission for the last several years, who have been watching the building and watching all of this happen. So last September, we were thrilled when we all came together here and agreed that there could be a joint effort to go forward with this. I want to reiterate to you that the University Area Commission has never changed its position since last year. We stand firmly with Ohio State and with the purchase of the building by Ohio State, we hope, from the Columbus Board of Education, and so that we can move together. I wanted to just mention to you again that in our neighborhood, of the buildings that we had lost so far, of which Indianola becomes our kind of the greatest hope here, is that over the past 30 years between the University District and the North Side, we have lost, for whether they've changed or sold or completely have been demolished, Northwood School, Indianola at 16th, Calumet, 6th Avenue, 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, 11th Avenue, 5th Avenue, Neal Avenue, Michigan, Milo, Highland, and Indianola's old rival in basketball, Everett. So I just want to mention that there have been a number of schools, and this building represents an awful lot of what could be the hope of the future generation of not just Wyland Park, but many of the neighborhoods that I have just mentioned before. When I first stepped through the door of that building, I was 23 years old and taking my first teaching job, earning more money in 1 year, $5,000, than my father had ever earned in a year in his lifetime. And I wound up staying for the next 20 years before I went to join the faculty that was starting at the emerging high school at Fort Hays, taking with me in some great part a number of the students who my husband was teaching at Indianola still, and I was now seeing over at Fort Hays as they entered high school there. In the years that I was at Indianola, I used whatever excuse I could possibly have to get my students out of school when it seemed appropriate and take our books for history and English, and we would walk through the neighborhood and we would study our lessons literally on the sidewalks and step of the Beers Log Cabin, the Neal Avenue Mansion, which was on the Underground Railroad, the remnants of the old Indianola Park, and pointing out to them that the architecture of the neighborhood and the history of the neighborhood was so rich that people in suburbs would give anything to be able to live in this neighborhood. But when I took them to High Street to cross High Street into Ohio State, many of them balked because their parents felt that that was unsafe for them, that they were not welcome there. And in those years, I have to say, we sort of agreed with them as teachers at Indianola that those kids were not necessarily welcome at Ohio State, and they didn't see their future there. So what we did was we worked always and very hard to make sure that we knew that Columbus kids could work at could be part of Ohio State and work to make those connections. When the first Campus Partners and Campus Collaborative were formed, I was the person who co-chaired with Dean Nancy Zimfer at that time the Learning Bridge, of which Indianola was one of 13 schools where we met collaboratively to talk about this strange feeder pattern and how you educate children through a system in which we could never really predict where they were going next. I have to agree so much with Susan Colbert said last September when she told about how many different schools the kids in the neighborhood were going to and where they are going. I want to make sure that you perhaps leave with just one thought, and that is when Robert Frost wrote that poem about good fences make good neighbors, he also meant words, and fences don't make good neighbors, and that was his whole point, and neither do words. So we're hoping you move forward looking at the words to make sure that this is a successful collaboration, but we stand, the Area Commission, behind Ohio State. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for being here this evening, and thank you to everyone. You were our last speaker. Appreciate it very much, everyone who's taken the time to come down here this evening. Any clarifying questions for our most recent speakers? Board Member Gibbs?
Just as a quick question, is there anybody in the audience against this resolution? Okay. I mean, I just think it's important to recognize if there's anybody not in support. I thank you all for coming, and I think it's very interesting in that while you are all here, there's also been a lot of advocacy online, via email. A lot of people have reached out about this particular legislation. I thank all the partners that are here, and thank you all for staying vested in the district, knowing that we are always big advocates of collaboration, and that we have to make sure the district is in the best position to provide opportunities. And someone said we're in the rainy season. Well, I can't wait to get out the snowy season. But that even with some of those facilities, just as an FYI, we are in the process again of looking at how to collaborate, and we'll be looking at additional properties that may not be in service. But my board member Peretti also said something that says with the stroke of a pen, our budget can change. And with the stroke of a pen, so can our student demographics. If we were to make one of these schools a feeder for COS, the building would explode tomorrow. But we have to look at how to be the best stewards of facilities, of our capacity, of our finances, so that it best serves communities and our students to come, and not just for those today. So I really do thank you for your advocacy, and know that we have really weighed this, maybe diligently, but we have all seriously considered the legislation before us.
Thank you. And I do believe Mr. Peretti was next.
Thank you. You know, I just want to hammer home the fact. I mean, this is all about an issue of where we originally what we were thinking of and we were told. This has nothing to do with us dragging our feet because we want to or anything like that whatsoever. You know, we made a commitment and we were excited about the partnership. So I was a little disappointed when it comes to communication and how this has developed going forward and the back and forth. Yeah, it is a little disappointing seeing that going on when we originally had conversations where this was. You know, I'm for, you know, selling this to OSU and continuing that partnership. I'm just disappointed that the contentious point was us being a partner with OSU on educational needs. I am a public school board member. I have public education is my #1 priority. So I try to keep that in mind with all the decisions that we make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peretti. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, just very briefly to our final speaker, Doreen. You know, I appreciate and thank you for bringing this book tonight. that you co-authored about Columbus and the Ohio State University, and the pictures and write-up about this particular school that are included with some of the history. I know, again, this was the first junior high school designed as a junior high school in the country. And coincidentally, and I probably said this back in September, but the superintendent of schools at that time, Jacob Chawan, and is mentioned in the MOU, was also his granddaughter sent us some documents last year, and with original writings from him and about him, and it was great to get those, and I hope that some folks will take a look and see what was there of value historically as well. But thank you for bringing this.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. The chair will now entertain a motion that we adopt item 7.1.
We're not there yet. We're going to get some response about the cost, the $7,000, $9,000 change, or?
They've agreed to the 9.
Oh, okay.
So let's,
Fine.
the chair will now entertain a motion that we adopt item 7.1. We can have further discussion after that. Moved by Mr. Peretti, seconded by the Vice President. All right. Is there further discussion? Yes, Ms. Gibbs.
Yes. So will the administration get them in an itemized list? Even though they have agreed to it, they've asked for an itemized list. Can we agree to get that to them as soon as possible?
Mr. President, to Ms. Gibbs, I'm going to have to defer to our legal counsel because my understanding is that, the position that he shared with OSU on this was his understanding of where the board wanted to go with that issue. So I'm going to defer to him.
So, I just want to just publicly say you are going to work on it and work that out.
Mr.
With legal
President, to
counsel.
Board Member Gibbs, I think that's a decision that the board is going to have to make because the position that our attorney took on that was his understanding of where the board was at on that issue.
Okay.
Mr. Brown.
I just want to clarify what we're about to vote on. Provided that what we are voting on now is language that was discussed just a few minutes ago that includes the word preferred and the changes, the technical changes that I mentioned, provided that is part of this, and that there is agreement on the payment of the $9,000, pending closing, I believe. Is that the motion? And with that, I'm satisfied.
Mr. Treasurer, is that your understanding?
That's not how it was.
So perhaps you offer an amendment, a quick amendment.
Well, then, in that case, I move to amend the resolution 7.1 to include specifically the agreement to the $9,000 and to include the addition of the word preferred in item III under the guiding principles before the word provider, as well as to make the 4 technical changes that I had mentioned.
So you have offered an amendment. Is there a
I have offered
second?
that amendment.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Okay. Ms. Bartley, still in the room? Ms. Bartley, is OSU amenable to those items?
Yes, OSU is amenable to those items.
Thank you. All right. So, Mr. Treasurer, assuming there's no further discussion on the amendment, please call the roll on the amendment only.
Vice President Cole.
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs.
Yes.
Ms. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Peretti.
Yes.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
President Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
All right, we are back to our main motion as soon as we hear from the treasurer that the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry, and the amendment passed.
Thank you, sir. All right, back
My
to the main
bad.
motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? Mr. Treasurer?
Okay, Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, and thank you to folks from Ohio State University, and especially to the folks from the communities who are here and have helped work this out to proceed. Thank you.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank everyone who came here tonight representing the community, or just because you were interested in this incredibly important topic. Thank you very much for your presence this evening. You may feel free to leave now if you like, with no feeling of guilt whatsoever. We do appreciate you being here. Thank you. And I saw an old friend of mine who I have a lot of respect for in the back there, Pasquale Grado. Just wanted to say hello. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate the recognition, and I want to say hello to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Look forward to the future at that building. Thank you. All right. Now, we do still have remaining our consent agenda. So the board will now, or the chair will now entertain a motion that we adopt our consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Board members, any questions or comments on any piece of legislation contained within the consent agenda this evening? Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, quick question on 10.3 on our policy updates. Just for clarification from our team, I asked when these first came up to talk about our College Credit Plus program, and what would the impact be? If you remember that, we had a discussion about this policy and how it will impact the upcoming students, and there was a number of questions. Board Member Brown, did you have any response to that from the questions that were presented at the previous meeting?
I'm sorry, I don't have any recollection of any questions being
That was it.
presented. I know we talked about getting questions to me following that meeting and the first reading. They were answered at the time, but there was nothing left remaining unanswered, and I have not received any additional questions.
Didn't know if you had extra piece. The second one is around the compulsory age legislation, where we define compulsory age. In one of these, if you can clarify, and it's compulsory age is 6 to 18 that you're required. I only have a quick question, and it's for special ed, and if that number, Dr. Roush, I see you coming, does that compulsory number change for special ed or not?
President Baker, to Board Member Gibbs, the compulsory education age does not change. We're still required to make education available to students. I believe for special education students, it's through their 23rd birthday. In statute, even a typically developing student would still have access to a tuition-free education through their 22nd birthday.
So does that change how we should state it, or should we say that, and my question is, would a parent of a special needs student know that they had the right to stay in school or to have additional services until 22? Because the way this is written, I know compulsory is that you have to, but should there be an enabling clause that say students, just asterisk or something that say students, or special needs students, may elect to receive services to 22? Because we don't define it.
President Baker, to Board Member Gibbs, that's provided in statute. It's, I believe it's 3313.64, covers all of that. The compulsory education actually has more to do with when you'd have a truancy filing, because if it's compulsory education, that's when we're required to file truancy, because they would be considered an unruly student, which is a status offense. The fact that they're over the age of 18, because then at that point in time they become an adult, they're not compelled to attend school, and we're not actually even, we can't even file that status offense, that unruly charge for habitual truancy, because at that point, they're of the age of majority.
So it's already listed, but we don't need to add that as an additional bullet
President
point,
Baker, to
no?
Board Member Gibbs, I do not believe that's
Okay.
necessary.
if a student elects to stay till they're 22 or after 18 or 19, can they still have truancy charges filed against them?
President Baker, Board Member Gibbs, no, they cannot have truancy charges filed at that point because they're no longer of compulsory school age.
So anytime they go to school from 19 to 22, if you elect to stay in school, you're volunteering, therefore it's not compulsory, so it doesn't kick in. Is that what you're telling me?
President Baker, Board Member Gibbs, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted clarification on that.
Any other questions, board members? Yes, Ms. Hudson.
Thank you, President Baker.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about 16.1. 16.1, not about Mr. Saunders per se. I have been raising. I feel like I want to make sure I share with my colleagues and again with the interim superintendent and folks. I very much support and think we absolutely have to have this task force. I feel like the task force membership is it's a community cross-section with a few other folks, but it's not really a full community cross-section like we've had with FMP. But I had really thought this was going to be much, much more about experts coming in, and then we would take that expert advice and go out to the community and go out to our community partners as we do it. And I'm just concerned, we add a person. I had suggested, in this place, we add Lisa Cordes, who has dealt with all kinds of community collaborations. But I think it's more importantly, not about the person. It's about, changing land use needs, changing demographics across our community, having somebody from the city on the task force, not testifying, but on it, from MORPC, with smart cities and those vocational experts that are out there. I guess we're just getting out of the gate, and I think that the opportunity to have those experts that can take us at 30,000 feet is still possible. And I just want to encourage that we go that route, because otherwise I think we've got a cross-section of a portion of the community without having a cross-section of lots of other parts of the community. And there's a lot going on in Columbus that is, in our region, that is pretty important. And on the flip side, we have our diminishing funding. Really what we saw in 16, it's going to be a very big challenge to try to do the traditional funding for traditional buildings. And so collaborations are going to be so important. And so having those experts to work on those things, I think it's not about just this group hearing from those experts, it's about the experts being part of it. And so I want to make sure I say that before. And I do not oppose Mr. Saunders joining the task force, but I'd like to see us widen our lens a bit more before we get too far down the road.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments on any piece of legislation contained? Yes, ma'am.
Really quick, just at 11.2 and 11.3 on the tax valuation, if Dr. Stanford, or can someone speak to that one specifically, about the Neal Avenue property and the request that they made, if you can just share that.
President Baker, to Ms. Gibbs, I'm going to defer to our General Counsel, Mr. Braverman, to answer that question for you.
President Baker, members of the board, Ms. Gibbs, I believe the two you're referring to are probably 11.2 and 11.3.
Yes.
Those are both office buildings that are in the Arena District. And what this settlement does essentially is get for the district the revenue that it would realize over the next several years if it were successful, if it went through the entire proceeding and got the valuation it was looking for. Our attorneys had discovered that there were sales of this thing and the auditor was still carrying these buildings at the old value. What these direct payments effectively do for the next several years is equate to the additional tax revenues that would come to the district if the valuation were higher. And then you'll see at the end of it, the building's effectively valued at the post-sale rate. So it's kind of a win-win for the district. The district gets the revenue without having to engage in any further legal proceedings and spend additional money on lawyers and appraisers and so forth.
Thank you for your diligence on these. And as we do experience a great growth and boom, we realize that the district also received property taxes from these new developments, in that the school district, to Mr. Peretti's point, is owed our fair share of those finances. But how often can they go to ask for a revision? Or for,
I believe it's every 3 years in the revaluations that they can go in, and if there's a change in circumstances, for example, in addition, the county may add the value, because we'll file on the property, and if there's some sort of destruction of part of the property, if there's something serious that lowers the value, then the property owner can go to the board of revision and ask for a reduction.
so that hasn't changed. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I'll call on Board Member Reyes to talk briefly about our recognition of National Social Workers Month.
Thank you, President Baker. I'd like to read the resolution on behalf of the school board for the recognition of National School Social Workers Month. I'll just read 5 of the whereas clauses. Whereas school social workers in Columbus City Schools and across the nation serve as vital members of the educational team, playing a central role in creating a positive school climate and partnership between the home, school, and community to ensure student academic success. And whereas school social workers support the educational, social, and emotional development of all students by decreasing the impact of barriers to academic success. And whereas social workers provide interventions to address challenges such as mental health, behavior difficulties, disabilities, crisis response, poverty, bullying, abuse, grief, and addiction to enable students to achieve academic goals. And whereas school social workers assist families in assessing resources to improve their circumstances and the readiness to learn foundation for their children. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Columbus Board of Education thanks, with a big thanks, district social workers and recognize and appreciate the important role they play in the lives and education of students and their families.
Thank you for that. Do we have any social workers left in the room? Yeah, okay. Thank you for all your hard work, and please share with everyone on your staff that does similar work our gratitude. Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else, I will call on our treasurer to call the roll on the consent agenda.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes, although I abstained from 11.2 and 11.3.
Mr. Peretti?
Yep.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you very much. Now, are there any brief points of pride or anything else any board member would like to share? Any brief announcements? Yes, Board Member Reyes.
I've got a couple, but they'll be brief. So I would say take out your pens, take out your calendars. I've got a couple of great things coming to Columbus City Schools. She Can Make a Difference is a program being brought to by our students. The details are, it is April 21st from 12 to 5 o'clock at Schiller Rec Center, 1069 Jager Street. These are for girls grades 4th and up. So we invite you, actually our cause students, our girls, are putting this on by themselves with a little bit of help. But I do encourage you to come to She Can Make a Difference today. On your calendars on the next day, please put down on Sunday, April 22nd, a free event for Columbus City Schools Day for Families at the Columbus Museum of Art. So this is a free day for all of our families. That is Sunday, April 22nd, 1 to 5 p.m. We will have some short remarks from our Columbus City School administrators and other wonderful people at 145. There is free parking available, so, and you can take the CODA. So please join us at Columbus City Schools Day for Families on Sunday, April 22nd. And lastly, for my announcements, please do not forget National Children's Day celebration in Columbus City Schools, Saturday, May 12th, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We have several schools participating, so please visit our website, but I will run through them briefly. Columbus Global Academy, Columbus North International, East High School, Marion Franklin High School, Walnut Ridge High School, West High School. As it states in the title, this is an opportunity for us to celebrate all of our children. All of our children will participate throughout our district. We'll also have community partners coming and talking to our families and our children about services they provide within our school. So I encourage everyone to please attend our National Children's Day. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Fine. Just two items briefly. The first is the students nationally that did the protest of gun safety issues last month following the tragedy in Parkland are again planning a walkout on Friday. Friday happens to be the 19th anniversary of Columbine and the tragedy that occurred there. I don't know whether there will be any participation in our schools. I've not heard of any, but it is a significant date and another reminder that we all need to continue to focus on keeping our children and our students safe. Secondly, and this is also very important, voting is underway. Election Day is in 3 weeks, but you can vote nearly every day up until then in the primary election, whichever party that you'd prefer. Plus, there are issues on the ballot, and I would encourage everyone to please set a good example for our students and get out and vote, and whether early or on Election Day, and participate in our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Gibbs.
Two things. One, Right to Read Week is coming up, and it will happen all over our district. So I'm encouraging my colleagues and our community partners to reach out to one of your neighborhood schools and volunteer to come in and read and to be a part of our National Right to Read Week. And secondly, it doesn't look like it now, but it is getting very warm and sunny. I just want to give one more reminder for school bus safety. Please give your school buses enough space to stop, to let our students off the bus, to let them cross the street. We know it is easy to get distracted by phones and what is going on throughout the neighborhood, but we don't want a repeat of the incidents we had at the beginning of the year when it's warm and people are not paying attention. So please pay attention, especially around our buses and our school district vehicles, so that we can continue to have a safe year and we can let our kids cross and go to school safely. That includes, please observe crosswalks, please observe the 20-mile-per-hour in the school zones, and please give our buses enough space to turn and to let our students cross the street.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. And speaking of safety, it is prom season, and I think East may be the first prom, which I think may be this weekend. Oh, wow. So this is me at my prom. This is April 1990. I'm the one on the right. But speaking of keeping our students safe, a lot of students will be out during prom season, so do what you can to be supportive. You can probably take that down now. Yes, those are tails on that tuxedo. So do what you can to be supportive so that they have fun but are also safe. And with that, move to adjourn, moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer? the things you do as president for this district.
Okay, Mr. Peretti.
Yeah.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
President Baker.
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Brown.
Provided the picture does become part of our minutes, yes.
Ms. Gibbs.
Yes.
And Ms. Hudson.
Yes.
That motion carried. So
Thank you.